What's going on, everybody? Mortem here, this time bringing you a companion overview for Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous, which is currently in beta. What this video is going to aim to do is simply tell you guys who the companions are. I can't go into their story very much because A, I don't know how it ends, but I will try to give you guys as much info about who these people are, so you guys can make some informed decisions ahead of how you want to build your party, that kind of thing. With no further ado, let's get into it. First up, we have Sela. Sela is an iconic Pathfinder character. Now, what that means is that she's heavily involved with the Pathfinder universe as a whole, and I have a video explaining what iconic characters are if you want to check that out, so we're not going to spend too much time on it here. Suffice to say, she is an iconic paladin, she is a lawful good human, and she is like the definition of a paladin. So, lawful good, obviously, very much so about helping out her friends and bringing justice unto demons. She is a very positive character, the kind of person you'd want to share a beer with, that kind of thing, and she has a very hard outlook on the Crusades themselves. Now, next up, we have Camilla, or Camilla? I don't know. Camilla is a neutral half-elf, so she is just true neutral, which is a rarity. Camilla is also a noble from the city of Canabris that you start the game in. And just so we're aware, I'm going to, again, try to keep this as spoiler-free as possible, so I won't tell you too terribly much about what you learn about her, but she has some cool connections that you can kind of learn. Truth be told, I actually think she's probably the most boring of the characters I've encountered so far, because she's got a lot of sassy things to say, shall we say, but it's like, you're not even that good. She is a spirit hunter. A spirit hunter is an archetype of the shaman class. Shamans in Pathfinder simply converse with the spirit world in a variety of ways. Next up, we have Lan and Wind Dog. So, Lan and Wind Dog are actually mutually exclusive, it would appear. If you pick one, you can't have the other. However, I don't know if later in the game that comes back to bite you in any way, because, I only have access to so much of the game through beta, so, who knows, Early on in the game, you will meet Lan and Wind Dog. So let's start with Wind Dog, because I have her in my party here. So Wind Dog is a neutral evil mongrel. So mongrels are a Pathfinder race that is descended from the Crusaders from the First Crusade. Now during the First Crusade, Crusaders didn't really know what fell radiation could do to you, and as such, they exposed themselves to it, and children born from those people were hideously deformed. Their parents, seeking to, not have them all murdered, ran underground. So mongrels are a race that lives in the underground ruins underneath the World Wound area of Galarion. So up until the game started, they were apparently thought to be a myth, but then you meet a couple of them, Lan and Wind Dog, and then ta-da, here we are with the mongrels. So each of the mongrels looks very different. Almost all of them have some sort of animalistic appearance. Wind Dog here is like a spider and a cat. Now, that said, she is a basic fighter who defaults to a bow, but being a fighter, she's obviously pretty versatile when it comes to weapons. Again, she is neutral evil. She doesn't really care too much about law or chaos. She simply cares about the most calculated way to gain power. She is with your party because you're the strongest person she knows, basically. Wind Dog is all about finding ways to gain strength, basically. That said, she is nonetheless a pretty smart character. Or at least cold and calculated might be the more appropriate thing to say. Now, that brings us to Lan. Lan is kind of the opposite of Wind Dog, as you might imagine, with them being mutually exclusive, in that Lan is a neutral good character who looks pretty striking. His lizard and goat horn or whatever it is, it's a pretty unique view. Nonetheless, he is a good character who's all about kind of bringing glory to his tribe of mongrels and trying to make a better life for them as a whole, whereas Wind Dog is almost entirely concerned with herself. So again, they're kind of opposites that way, and you do have to choose one of them pretty early on in the game. Again, without spoilers, we're not going to go too much into that. Now, the other cool thing about Lan is that he is what is called a Zen Archer, which is an archetype of the monk class. So, whereas most monks use their fist, of course, Lan uses a bow, which is just pretty cool. There's a lot of stuff going on with the Zen Archer. I actually recommend you Google that for Pathfinder. It's got its own whole, conversation set up about it. Nonetheless, moving on. That brings us to Walt Jeff. So, Walt Jeff is a chaotic neutral tiefling. His class is Eldritch Scoundrel, which makes perfect sense for a tiefling, to be honest. Now, Walt Jeff here is pretty hilarious. Like, when you meet this guy, he plays like a trick about pretending to be a demon on a guard, and I don't know, it really made me chuckle the way they did it. Walt Jeff is a thief. He talks a lot. He is, chaotic neutral, best way to put it. He's not really a bad guy, but he's also definitely not out to help you out, because he is, of course, a thief, which are inherently a bit self-interested most of the time. You find Waldiff with a group of tieflings who are rather creatively calling themselves the Thieflings, which I thought was hilarious, to be honest. I laughed at that way harder than I should have when I heard it. Nonetheless, Waldiff, eldritch scoundrel, thief, talks a lot, more concerned about himself, bit of a scaredy cat kind of guy. There you go, he's pretty cool. That brings us to Ninio, or Ninio, I don't know. Ninio is probably my least favorite of all the ones I've encountered so far. Ninio is a scroll savant wizard who is really annoying. So she's very concerned with, like, history and everything, and, like, basically, like, just all the knowledge she can possibly gain in any way she can gain it. The problem is that she's annoying. So she refuses to learn your character's name because she deems it not important, and brains can only take so much. So, like, I can't deal with this woman. I actually kicked her out of my party while I was playing because she's that annoying to me. She is a companion, so there you go. That brings us to one of the more interesting characters, to be sure, Ember. Ember is a neutral good elven witch. Specifically, she's a stigmatized witch. Now, Ember has a pretty cool backstory. She was burned at the stake at one point, which she managed to survive after being pulled off of it by a crusader. Ember is an elven seer of sorts, is really kind, has a lot of magical gifts that witches have, and she also has a black raven that follows her around that she calls Soot. Very interesting character. She's definitely the kind-hearted type, the one that, like, doesn't want you to kill people, that kind of person. Because despite all of the horrors she's seen in life, she is, in fact, not letting it bring down her worldview, shall we say. But regardless, definitely one of the more striking characters in the game, I would say. And that brings us to Socil. Socil is a neutral good human cleric from the group that worships Shaylin. I think it's like the Order of the Eternal Rose or something like that. It's in Kingmaker, and for the life of me, I can't remember the name of it. He is a cleric from that order, the same order that Valerie is in from Kingmaker. But he is a cleric, unlike Valerie, and he is a neutral good human. So, as a cleric of a goddess who worships art and things, he is himself an artist, and is naturally a very good aligned person. Definitely doesn't want you to do evil things. But more importantly, he's a cleric, and clerics are inherently useful in this game. And that brings us to Regul? I'm assuming it's probably Regul. I don't know. Regul is a lawful evil gnome Hell Knight, which is hilarious to me. So, the thing about gnomes in Pathfinder is that they suffer from this thing they call the bleaching, which basically means if a gnome doesn't live life to its fullest, so to speak, they literally start turning white from their hair to their skin until they just die. Being a lawful character is inherently killing him. He is nonetheless a Hell Knight, which are usually lawful evil characters, and he's determined to go that route. So, if nothing else, you gotta hand it to this guy's conviction, because he's gonna die for his beliefs, for sure. Again, Hell Knight, very stern guy, lawful evil, cold calculated in more of a strategic sense. He doesn't care about, like, if someone dies in the name of achieving the said goal, as long as the goal is achieved. Very cold and calculated. Now, that doesn't mean he's throwing lives away for no reason, like, say, maybe a chaotic evil person would do. He is nonetheless not afraid to throw those lives away. And that brings us to a Roosh Chalet, best guess? Now, technically, she's a chaotic neutral tiefling, but I think that is more of a game mechanic restriction because she is presented in all of the dialogue and cutscenes as a succubus, which is actually a demon. But I don't think they had, or wanted to make an entire demon class when they had the tiefling class, which is very similar, ready to go. Keep in mind that while her race is technically a tiefling, which is fiendish origins, a Roosh Chalet is supposed to be a succubus, which is just an actual demon. She is an espionage expert, which is from the ranger class. Now, she is chaotic neutral, but according to her, she has turned away from her demonic ways and is on the path to retribution. So she has a very interesting story that's presented pretty immediately. And, honestly, she's a tiefling, so inherently pretty cool. And last but not least, that brings us to Grebor. Grebor is a neutral dwarf slayer. So, Slayers are like bounty hunters in a lot of ways. This guy, his whole thing is bounty hunting. Exactly that. People pay him to track down targets, and that is what he does for a living. And you will meet him fairly early on in the game, but he won't be available as a companion until much later. He's pretty cool. He has an interesting backstory. Again, trying to avoid spoilers the absolute best that I can. But he helps you on more than one occasion get out of a tight spot. And as a person, especially being a neutral person, he has a much more calculated dwarf angle on things. He is very much so the do the sensible thing at the sensible time kind of stuff. More importantly, he is a professional. He takes his bounty hunting very seriously to the point where, like, you know, he won't give out clients' names, that kind of thing, won't tell you who paid him, that kind of stuff. And honestly, he's just a pretty cool guy to have around. There you go, guys. That is a look at the companions for Pathfinder Wrath of the Righteous. Again, tried to avoid all the spoilers I could avoid, so I didn't want to go like in too deep about how you meet them, that kind of thing. So I hope I wasn't too vague about it. I just kind of wanted to present the companions, but try to keep it as spoiler-free as possible, and I hope that I achieved that. With that in mind, thank you guys so much for watching. I certainly hope you stick around and like, comment, subscribe, all that jazz really helps the channel out. We are growing so much here lately. I actually just added a professional logo to the channel, which I thought was really cool. So again, just thank you so much. May you wander in wisdom and have an amazing day.